Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skills for Mars Future of Work. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Sage Ke'alohilani Quiamno, who is the co-founder of Future for Us. We're going to discuss the struggles that women of color face in the workplace and how Future for Us is supporting them advance their careers, whether as entrepreneurs or in the corporate world. Join us on this very passionate discussion. If you do want to know more about the future of work, your future, consider subscribing to the channel. On every episode, someone will share their knowledge so we can make better decisions about our lives and our careers. And now I give you Sage. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skills for Mars Future of Work. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Sage Ke'alohilani Quiamno. She's the co-founder of Future for Us. Sage, welcome to Skills for Mars.
Awesome. Aloha, everybody. And also, she nailed my entire name. Everybody who's listening, she nailed my Hawaiian name. So I am very impressed. Thank you so much for having me here. Aloha. My name is Sage Ke'alohilani Quiamno, and I'm the co-founder of Future for Us.
Sage, very, very glad to have you here. Could you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a young women of color entrepreneur. I'm the co-founder of Future for Us. We are a platform dedicated to advancing women of color at work through community, culture, and career development. So we have a growing community of over 7,000 women of color professionals across the U.S. And steadily growing into a more global reach because of this pandemic. And now our business model has switched to virtual. So now we are being able to have our programming online, and now we have women of color from Berlin, London, India, etc. So that's really exciting. But we are mainly a community of women of color professionals. What Future for Us does, it provides tools and resources to advance and work. We also work with companies to create awareness about diversity, equity, inclusion, how to start programs for women of color professionals specifically, to hire them and also promote them into higher paying positions. And yeah, that was a bunch of this is our work. We launched in January 17th of 2019 last year. It's been, oh my God, like a year and 4 months. And that's what we were able to accomplish. Last year, we had two large scale conferences that focused on the future work, which centered around women of color. And we also went on a 7-city roadshow tour in partnership with the Riveter, which is a female forward co-working space, and brought our State of Women of Color, like our presentation across country in the United States. And we were able to reach over 1,000 women of color, and brought like data and storytelling together. And so that's kind of like the bread and butter of what we do, is that we bring data and storytelling together to create awareness about why is it important to advance women of color work. And we can talk a little bit more about the data in this interview as well.
Oh, definitely. I was going to ask you. So tell me a bit about the data and a bit about the storytelling.
Yeah, so a lot of the times our work is gathering reports and data from different, diversity, equity, inclusions, or even like McKinsey. So McKinsey has a annual report that they bring out. It's called Women in the Workplace. And every year they study, how are women getting hired, promoted, what are the challenges and specific barriers they're facing in the workplace. And they added a section about women of color. And they have data that, that says that 20% of women of color that make up the US population, but hold 40% of the lowest wage work in America. And then you can kind of see what's happening with the pandemic is that, for instance, Future for Us community, over 60% of them have lost their jobs or are laid off or furloughed. And that is an issue. So that was one of the big data that people are just very shocked, right? Like we're 20% of the population, but hold 40% of the lowest wage work in America. That is something where we understand that there's an issue about getting through the door, right? And getting the high paying jobs that we deserve and that we need. And the second data point would be, 21% of us feel like we need to downplay our ethnicity to be more successful at work. So it touches upon about, how is culture valued? How is your identity as a woman of color? Whether you're indigenous like myself or a Black woman, Latina, Asian American, immigrant, we hold so many different identities, and this intersectionality of being a woman, right? So you face gender-based bias in the workplace, and then also number two, being a woman of color, so racial bias in the workplace. So being hit by these two different biases in the workplace is really preventing women from getting jobs, from getting hired, right? Number two is getting promoted into the next level at the C-suite. There's another data piece that only 3% of women of color make are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in the United States. Like what? 3%. There's more Johns. There's more CEO names named John, and more blonde CEOs than there is women of color. Like, sit with that, right? Like, there's more Johns, and so when we're thinking about that, we only have, I think it's either two or there's only two or one women of color CEO of a Fortune 500 company right now, and that's just insane. Like that is insane to know, and also that's the fact, right? But also know that women of color are the fastest growing segment of degree holders.
Yep.
So women of color are getting more degrees, even getting graduate degrees faster than any other demographic out there, right? And this is
they
like
complete
particularly
more, right?
relevant.
The rate of completion is higher as well.
Correct. Rate of completion, and this is heavily leaning toward Black women, right? So having the women of color achieving the degree, right? Like they are crossing T's, dotting the I's, right? Making it happen, and then going into the workforce, right? Getting hired if they do get hired, but then not making as much as their white colleagues, and not getting the promotions as quick enough as their white colleagues. And so the data points of being the fastest degree holder, but when you hit middle management, that's when we see everything drop off. Is that 60% of college graduates today in the United States are women, but when we get into an entry level job mid career, there's only 20% women, and not just women of color, like just women in general. So like women are getting degrees, they're getting the jobs, and then mid management they're drop off. Like there's a huge drop off there, because they're not being supported at that management leader level. So when we're talking about that data, right, like the data is a shocking piece, right? People are like, oh, wow, like I didn't even know this was an issue. But also we bring and amplify voices of women of color who are leaders, who talk about their experiences. Is that we don't even talk about our experiences anymore, and why that matters so much. And marrying the data and the storytelling together to make a very compelling story, right? Like a very compelling case that this is something that you need to be aware of, but also invest in. And so that is something that we're working with and working on, but also that is what we're known for with our programming, and why not only women of color are part of our community, but also because also companies and allies, because we understand that change is not going to just be on the shoulders of women of color or people of color, right? Change happens when all of us do our work in changing the workplace and making it more equitable for all.
True. I want to stay a bit on what women of color do, and they do better than others. And one thing that I read, and correct me if I got maybe the wrong data, is entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in the US, where data is more readily available, they are contributing around close to 200 billion to the economy, more than close to around 2 million companies founded or co-founded by women of color, which is a huge amount. Is this, in your view, a better way to learn, to get into the business, get yourself that leadership experience, and then maybe move to corporate? Or do you think the future will stay in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I'm just laughing because as many women of color, so around your question is that, yeah, women of color are also the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs per year.
Yeah.
you know that is insane, because as I talked about the data, right, like that women are dropping off at the mid-career middle management level, is that women of color especially are not getting supported. So there's a mass exodus from the corporate environment. Is that, if I'm not going to be promoted, if I'm not going to get the salary that I'm looking for to support and sustain myself, but also my family, right? Like women of color also hold more responsibilities to their families, right? They're usually the breadwinner. They usually are the caretakers of their elders, right? So like there's more financial responsibility, and so if that's not going to work in the corporate environment, because all of this, it's like harassment, right? Women of color are moving into the entrepreneur space where it's untraditional. It is like you get to use your lived experience and your grit and what you know with no bounds, right? Like it is your work, you own this, and then you get to profit from it. So I think that's why entrepreneurship is such a um it's so it's more desirable, right, for women of color to kind of go on that career path, is to start your own company and swing it that way, because you don't see yourself climbing the corporate ladder, because you already know what the challenges you're facing. You're facing political challenges. You're facing not getting support from allies, because if you need to go from a director to VP to a C-suite level, is that you're going to need allies around you who have power, who hold this gatekeeping power, who's going to have to like put the stamp of approval for you to become the C-suite level, right? Like this is all happening behind doors, but if they're not going to support you because certain way, then that's not going to happen. So that's kind of why and you say billion, but actually it's now trillion. It's
Okay.
$3.2 trillion that companies that are led by women of color are contributing to the U.S. economy, which is crazy.
Which
That
is
was by
amazing.
Yeah, and it's by that was from Fast Company from last year.
Yeah. Uh, because there is a point, right? Just everyone contributed to the economy, whether you're a man or a woman, no matter the color or anything, contributing and adding value to your communities and adding value to what's happening in the economy. So no one should be left behind because everyone is contributing.
Yep.
Did you ask these women who are becoming their own bosses, who are leading their own companies, are they happier? Are they leading a better life because they are entrepreneurs? Do they feel that they contribute more like this, or would they rather go back at some point in the corporate world? Is that the aim?
Yeah. Yeah, I think obviously that's a huge generalization. I don't want to make a
Yeah.
generalization for all women of color. They feel like they need to be entrepreneurs. That's not true. But what we see at the data and we see the trends is that you know, women of color are willing to take a risk, right? They rather take a risk and leave corporate the golden handcuffs, right? To try and make something of themselves, because now, like living in 2020, you see shining examples like Oprah, right? Like you see you see other forms of women of color who have made it. Whatever concept of made it means to you, right? But understanding that not everybody, that doesn't, there are women of color who are currently steadily climbing the corporate ladder, who are being successful. But I think at the end of the day, women of color are seeing entrepreneurship as a faster track to success, and also creating wealth for themselves, right? And entrepreneurship is in all of our blood, like as immigrants, as women of color from different cultures, is that you know buying, selling, creating, manufacturing, whatever it is, it's like entrepreneurship is like a part of our culture anyways.
Definitely. And where I'm heading with this is I'm wondering for myself, right? And I'm an entrepreneur as well. I work for
Mhm.
myself, and I've been in the corporate world. I like what I do now more than what I did before. I'm happier. I feel
Yeah.
like I've learned more,
Yeah.
that even in leadership skills, in communicating, in connecting with others, that my life has been directed so much by one way of thinking before, and now I can be so open-minded and explore all the different paths that at some point, especially considering the future of work, I feel that this experience is way more valuable, right? To know how to take risk, to know how to be a model for someone, to learn from scratch, not only how to lead, but how to do marketing, sales, employ people, run a business, right? There are multiple skills that will all be needed. It seems like we are heading more towards freelancing, gig economy, and a lot of change. So I look at this with very positive eyes. And I say, yeah, that's the way.
Yeah. And I know that was your question about, are women of color more happier or more satisfied and fulfilled when they're taking the entrepreneurship route? One hand, yes, you have the freedom, right? You have the freedom to create and make and own something. Two, you get to reap the financial benefits of it, right? Like if you are successful and turn it into it. The other piece of it, though, is that obviously, like I am speaking from my own experience in starting my own business for the first time ever. It has been the most rewarding opportunity of my life, right? Because yes, like what you said, like learning how to time manage, learning how to raise funds, learning how to market, learning how to do accounting, like you do all the things and it makes you a better person because it is the fast track to growth, personal and professional growth. But on the other hand, too, is that like not all of us can succeed at this, right? Not all of us are also made for this, which is another thing I also like. I think it's responsible. I don't, it would be irresponsible for me to be like, entrepreneur life is for everyone, right? Like, because that's
Definitely,
what's
it's not.
happening right now. It's like fetish, right? It's such a fetish right now about like, entrepreneurship and founders, like we're so glamorized by it, but like this is really hard shit. Like,
It, it,
right? Like, at the end of the day, like you gotta put yourself to the test, right? Like the bad days are going to be bad, the good days are going to be really good, but like you're going to have to learn how to ebb and flow with the crazy waves. But it's like, women of color also face entrepreneurs face higher risk and also bigger challenges of like number one, funding, because we all didn't come from a Trump family where my dad gave me $1 million to start my first business, right? Like because we don't have that funding, right? We're like, oh, what about you raising your money? Like, I wish I had an uncle who can give me 50K and be like, here's your loan, right? Yeah, you know what I
true.
mean? Like, like we don't have those resources. And even getting a loan, right, for most Black and Brown, folks is that working with banks, right, crowdfunding. Do you have the networks, the rich networks who are going to be supporting what you're doing, right? It's the funding issue, it's the resource issue, but time and time again, the data is showing even though women of color are facing these specific challenges and barriers, they are still succeeding, and that is like the core of an entrepreneur is that grit, right? And that
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 resilience.
that resilience and also the relentless drive of never giving up, right? Of like not giving up and just like problem solving and just managing your stress and making it happen. So, there's always two sides to the coin, and that's what I would kind of say about what I've observed.
And actually, we see it in this crisis as well. And we were just talking, right? And not only women of color, but women in general. It appears that the reaction to crisis in countries which are led by women is way better.
Yes, it is. Of course it is. Sorry.
Sage, tell me a bit about how Future for Us is supporting women of color and actually women in general, and what you are doing, what kind of actions you are leading, how is that working?
Yeah. So right now, how we are supporting our community and women of color in general is that we just launched free digital programming to support their careers at this time. So, like what I said is that 60% of our community members have lost their jobs. So we have like specifically curated content and brought in different experts to teach webinars for the month of April and May. to dealing with unemployment or layoffs, or like how do you brand yourself, how do you do what does a career transition look like, how do you become an inclusive leader. So that those are the kind of topics that we're really focused on. We've been averaging and selling out at a 300 Win of Color attending per week, which is pretty high versus a lot. Everyone's doing a webinar, right?
Yeah.
But this
Oh,
is
it's good.
specifically for women of color who either has lost their jobs or have been laid off or furloughed. But also women of color who still have positions and still want to grow their skill set, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion work, learning about inclusion is going to help you get the cutting edge of like, oh wow, I know what inclusion is. So when I'm building out and leading teams, I'm leading with inclusion, thus helping our build better teams, build better products, right, and getting higher revenue and a better and bigger brand. So like having that kind of network. So that's how we are working with women of color specifically, is providing those tools and resources. We have a LinkedIn closed group that provides different job opportunities. So since a lot of the women, a part of our community, have lost their jobs, we're working with companies like Microsoft, like Amazon, the companies that are still hiring at this time, promoting their jobs to our community, and helping them getting training for interviews, right? Like, interviewing for Amazon. I used to work, like working at Amazon. And you interviewing at Amazon is tough. Sometimes you have to interview 4, 5, 6 times, and like nailing whatever, like Amazon's leadership, leadership. I forgot what it's called, but their principle, yeah, leadership principles, and like that is kind of gatekeeping knowledge, right? That most women, no, most people wouldn't know. So we are providing our community with these like gatekeeping kind of like closed insider tips of trying to get into that company. And we're working steadily with them, and within on the company side, and with just women, just individuals and leaders in general, is that we're providing diversity, equity, inclusion expertise. We're providing like internally to their groups. How do we help the ERG groups, so that their employee resource groups, to build better programming to support their employees of color or like of any other identity that they have. And so, a lot of our work is, providing the access and opportunities, the jobs to women of color, but also like connecting women of color to companies who want to hire and retain them.
You've been close more than a year, actually, a bit more than a year working
Yep.
on this. Any results that are really either surprising you or really positive?
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest. Is that when my co-founder and I founded this platform and community last year, we didn't have a business plan. We didn't have a business plan. Our intent was to create a community, a platform that was going to shake things up, right? Like we were going to create noise. We were going to create noise with data, with intent, awareness, to have companies care. Like, why should you care about win of color talent? And then how are you as a company going to be held accountable to making sure that they're advancing within your company? But also have women of color um, professionals see themselves as leaders, because they do see themselves as leader, but kind of just validate them that like you're you're completely right. Like you are being gaslighted at your company. These challenges are like be above you, right? But here's a community that you can rely on, a reliable network that can give you the tools and resources to do. So, in terms of the question you're asking me, what are the new findings? Is that like, you know, we didn't even know that there was a real market for this, right? Like we didn't even know. I mean, we knew there's women of color out there, but we didn't know if they were actually going to be wanting to gather as much as they wanted to, right? Create networks with each other, cross sector, right? Like not in just tech, not in just finance, it's like nonprofits, like all of us wanted to come together. But also like what we're learning is that women of color who are part of our community are the actual change makers at the companies. These women are not only like, like software engineers, right? But they're also leading their ERG groups, right? They're also like helping the culture like department design different programming, right? Like they are the ones who are changing company culture from the bottom up, with the limited resources that they have and not getting paid for it, right? Like doing the extra ERG work, you're not getting paid on top of that or your salary, right? So that's kind of what we're knowing is that like we're learning a lot about our community, who they are, knowing that they're the passionate change makers who want to see, who are holding their companies and their leadership accountable, right? And that's what's exciting is that there's 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 community, there's a desire for community, there's a desire to make change within companies, and women of color are those folks, right? But also the desire, and there's a community of allies who want to see women of color advance as well. We have allies, men of color, white women, white men who are part of our community who are really like committed to this work. And that's what's been surprising for me and for our team is that we get to see that and we realize that there's a desire to see women of color advance, and this is not something that we're like, oh, like nobody wants to see, but there's people out there who care about this.
But the advantage is huge, and the value add is just amazing. The value add of having people even from any walk of life, anywhere, just contribute to society, right? I'm a recruiter. We always complain that we don't have enough people. The talent pool is not big enough. You always want to build bigger talent pools and contribute to building them, because then the life of the company is better, the life of every one of us, because companies bring value to all of us, right? That's which it just gets better. So it's surprising that not everyone is fighting for this. How are companies reacting? You said you're working with Microsoft and Amazon. How are they reacting to this? How are they supporting?
Yeah, so a lot of that work is being a new company, being it a lot, especially when you are a bigger brand and a bigger company like the Microsoft and Amazon, is that it takes a lot of time to not, to get in there, right? You need to
Yeah.
be trusted. The information that you're doing is like it's valid, right? So a lot of the times is that companies have the desire to do this work. Amazon and Microsoft all have the resources to do it, right? They all have a head of DNI. They have 1,000 teams to work on this. They have the best and the brightest, right, working on it. So we work with them, but more on the side of helping their employee resource group. On the other hand, we have a lot of mid-sized companies, VC startup, VC-backed startups who have no idea what this is about, right? Like completely new to the diversity, equity, inclusion space, completely new to like understanding that you need to, like, we're having a diversity issue, right? Like this is new talent. The next generation is going to call for that, right? Like if your company, it does not hire, like if I look on your team page and everyone is white, there's going to be red flags. You know what I mean? So now the conversations are changing. Now we have dialogue. So knowing that company, small, like mid-sized small companies, and then also VCs back startups, is that they're coming to us like, okay, so please help us with understanding DNI. How can we hire more? How do we build our teams more inclusively? How do we hire women of color? What does that look like? How do we build programming to support women of color employees to get to the next level? So that's the response that we're seeing on that particular type of company that comes to us.
Where would you like to see their response? Right? This is a beginning, as you said it. Where would you like this to go? What would be the next step?
Yeah, next step, I believe that every company needs to have a budget, because that's where it comes down to. It needs to invest in leading diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, right? Like create an entire like arm of the company. They need to continue this and have this at the top of their items, like their item list, as as much as like engineering, as much as product, right? As much as finance, is that this needs to still be at the top, because that it is what creates the framework of everything the company does, right? The decision that it makes, right? um, Diversity, equity, inclusion is the framework in which we make decisions. And so that's what I want to see companies do, is like start stepping up, start bringing, like being transparent. And that's a big, I'm a big advocate for pay equity. And when we talk about releasing how much people make, by gender, by salaries, by position from each company, the the data is alarming, because they do see that women are not getting paid as much as men. There's definitely a discrepancy, but I think companies need to be more transparent about, you know what, this is our current numbers and this doesn't look good, but we are going to put things into place, right, to make sure that women are going to be paid as equally as their male counterparts, women of color are, et cetera, et cetera. So I think companies also need to be, invest, be transparent, and also also advance, their women of color like employees.
Sage, I also wanted to ask you about models. I read before this discussion, I read a lot, and then apparently there's a lack of women of color models, right? I was reading that in physics you have, or any science, you have it's a very small percentage of women of color, right? The same in leadership positions in corporate, right? And even entrepreneurship it's big, but not yet that big. How are you doing with models at Future for Us? How are you managing to get them, put them on stage, get them to tell their story?
Yeah, I mean, that is like my favorite part ever. And what I do is that, like, I already admire so many women of color in my life. And what I see out there is that, like, my job is to go out there, meet and greet as many women of color leaders as possible, right? Learn their stories and, buy into their stories. And then how do I mean, because they're basically hidden figures, right? Like, the thing is, women of color, like, we have the models, it's just that they're not amplified. They're not, the light is not shown on them. The fact that there were Black female scientists at NASA, right, like, who were doing the mathematics to get us to the moon, but we didn't know that, right? Like, all we can talk about is Buzz, like the astronaut who like went to the moon, but we don't talk about like all the
Who
incredible
made it happen?
genius level. Yeah, but we're not talking about, the women of color who actually like led the science and also mathematics industry as well. But like, because of sexism, racism, women of color have dropped out. Black women have dropped out, even out of computer science. In the 80s, apparently, Black and Latino women were getting degrees in computer science, but when they were getting jobs in that field, they're facing discrimination. And then there was a huge drop in computer science degrees, right? Like, women of color getting like computer science degrees because of racism and sexism that they experience in the workplace, or even in the classroom, right? Like, when you're sixth grade, when you're hitting puberty, getting bullied because you're a girl and you're excellent at chemistry. I mean, like we are breaking whatever that norm is for a lot of people, the social norm. But again, there are women of color models out there. It's just that it's our job for Future for Us is to amplify these stories and these women. And how I find them is to, like, podcasting, what's on the news, other POC, like people of color led organizations, right? And I kind of like just meet and greet them. And every conference, like, oh my God, if you see me at a networking like event or a conference, like, this is what I do. I love it. It's the best.
And I guess because we're talking about conferences, you would have the virtual assembly right now in May, right? What are
Yeah.
you going to
So
talk about? What are going to be some of the topics?
some of the topics. Yeah. So on May 22nd, we are hosting our virtual assembly. It is a conference focused on women of color at work and the future of work. And so some of the topics we're going to talk about, it would be like culture shift. Like we're going to have a panel about culture shifters. Like how do you become a change maker and a culture shifter within your company? And it's going to be, they're going to be speakers like Brittany Chavez is the CEO of Shop Latina X, the first online marketplace for Latinx brands. There's going to be women like Cynthia T is the VP of Technology and Commerce at Nordstrom. Huge change maker within her own company. But also we have a panel about winning allies. So it's important as a woman of color and women in general is like, how do you win allies to support your advancement in the workplace? And so we have a full panel that includes Rebecca Bastian. She is the CEO of Own Trail, an online mentoring platform, but also the former VP of Culture at Zillow, the real estate website. And she first started her career as as a software engineer at Zillow, but as they were, as a small startup at that time, they started growing. Then she became, like she was really, really passionate about like how do we create culture, and then she created her own position basically. And so we'll have panels on that, but we will have an amazing keynote speech by Tiffany Dufu, the CEO of The Crew, a phenomenal Black woman. She is 1 out of 30, I believe, Black women who were able to raise over $1 million in VC funding for her startup. And she's going to talk about, leadership in her eyes during this pandemic. What does it mean to be a leader at this time? And then also we'll be closing out the keynote speech by Minda Harts, and she is the author of the memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. And she's going to talk about courageous leadership and what does it mean to not be cautious at this time, but still lead with courage, because every big social movement, social change has been made because of courage, right? And so it's going to be a full virtual event, dynamic speakers. There's going to be a lot of questions and engagement, but really focused on leadership skills. What does it look like for you to take it to the next level, right? And it's kind of it's more of a high level conference for women of color who want to kind of put that skill when they're ready to take up the next role.
Where can people find the conference? Futureforus.com or?
Yeah, so what they can do is that you can actually follow us on Instagram. So if you go to Instagram, you can follow our handle. It's at futureforus.now. So you go to Instagram and go to futureforus.now. And then you'll see a link to the bio. You'll see all of the speakers, and that's where you can get in touch with us.
Thank you very much, Sage. I'm not done. 1 second.
Yeah, of course.
You were talking about some actions that women of color can do to be successful. Did you pick up of anything like you would say these are some rules for success so you can make it out there and advance in the workplace? Something that you would like to say, look, if I would have to sum it up to 4 or 5 things that we all should do to become better leaders, to really advance in the workplace, this is what I would say. These are the learnings so far.
Yeah. What I like, it's kind of, I want to sum it up in a quote by one of my heroes. Her name is Arlen Hamilton. She was the first Black queer woman to grace the cover of Fast Company. She has her own VC firm that supports POC owned startups. And she has this great quote called, be a key maker, not a gatekeeper. And like, that to me is like the framework of a leader, right? It's like, how do we create keys for people? Being a key maker and thinking yourself as a key maker, right? Because we know what gatekeeping is. We do it intentionally and unintentionally sometimes, right? But leading with empathy, leading with grace, leading with under trust, right? Trust that like if we just created more opportunities, access, and more keys to open doors from a lot of people, that to me is leadership, right? Like when people give you a hand, when you lead, like what you said about, now the world is looking for female leaders is because they're key makers, you know, and they understand that access is a huge thing and opportunity is a huge thing for everyone, right? Ac- Opportunity knows no like, every culture, every language is opportunity, right? People are just trying to survive at this time. So thinking about it, I think that is something I've been holding true as a leader myself is that every day thinking about opening keys for folks, because that leads to every big success we ever had. I'm telling you, every deal that we've got, every sponsorship that we nailed, every media opportunity that we were able to get, all of our success is because we decided to be a key maker. And that's what I want all the listeners to kind of listen to is that think about every day how you can become a key maker.
That's really beautiful, and it's really good being a key maker. Nice sum up. How do you see the future of work for women of color, Sage? Um, Especially considering this that they are becoming key makers, that they are empathetic, that they are building trust, that they are very resilient, that they are entrepreneurs and they have this mindset, that they are becoming better and better at leadership. And we are now in a situation of crisis where apparently women do take the lead, right? And do have better results. How do you see us getting out of this crisis and afterwards? How do you see the women of color in the future of work?
You know, to be quite honest, I see us. I mean, the huge impacts that this pandemic has done for women of color, unfortunately, is going to have an effect for a decade. Like it's gonna be definitely. I want to recognize that and I want to name it. Is that I do want to have this optimistic view, about women of color taking control of the future of work. We are the future of work. Um, but like with COVID-19 and the outbreak and like our institutions failing to lead, it is leaving a lot of women of color behind. Yet, but at the same time, how I see women of color leading the future of work is that women of color are going to build better companies um, with inclusion first. They're going to be building better teams within these companies, and they're going to lead. They're going to lead every single corporation and really turn it on its head, right? Because after this pandemic, we can't be the same anymore. There's going to be a major, major shift in how we see and do work. And so, right now we have leaders discussing what that looks like, but I think women of color are still going to be influential in those discussions. It is just our job as both, as an entire, as a society to still center it on the most marginalized. And that's what you are doing, right? You created this platform, you got me on this podcast, is that creators like you who are amplifiers, right? Who are bringing this awareness to our work is what we all have to do as a community and a society and whole to move us forward. So I believe what women of color will be extremely influential in how we rebuild our economy, how we rebuild the future work.
And I'm very happy to amplify this kind of messages, Sage, especially from such passionate women, and to put a lot of work into this. It's not easy work. It's hard work. It's extremely hard work.
Yeah, I'm over here like, tell my body. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard on the body, that's for sure. I'm over here like, oh God. Sorry, it's just a joke. Ugh, it is hard work. It is
It
all
is.
it's all hard work, but like when I'm telling you, when I get like a heartfelt, DM or an email about how we've supported a woman of color in her career, like that to me is like, we're heading in the right direction.
And I would be more than happy to host some of them. If you want, another series of my podcast is called Transitions, which is about career change.
Awesome.
The aim is actually to prove those and to help those that are afraid of making change that this is possible. And if you know what others have been through, maybe you can balance a bit the risks, right? And think for yourself, hey, can I do it or not? What's better for me? How much do I need to save in advance? What do I need to learn? What were the struggles others were facing? So they are more ready and understanding of what change means. So if any of them wants to share their story and then we can amplify it even further, then I'm more than happy to host them for transitions as well.
Incredible.
Sage, where can people find you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Instagram? Where are you? Facebook? Twitter?
Yeah, so people can find me. If you're looking for Sage Ke'alohilani, you can type in my name in LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn user, so please find me on LinkedIn. Also, at my Instagram at Sage Q. It's SAGEQ. But follow Future for Us. We have a great newsletter that comes out every week talking about like issues around women of color, but also solutions. So catch us at futureforus.co. Follow us on Instagram and on LinkedIn. And hope you follow along.
And I will definitely link the URL as well when we post this.
Perfect.
Sage, thank you extremely much for today. It was a very nice conversation, very passionate and energetic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This has been incredible.